Hello, this is Archie Dunlop with Talking Astrology with Archie on Sunday, April the 16th, 2023. I don't really like America. I live in the Pacific Northwest and I do feel myself to be an alien. And, I suppose technically I am an alien, but there's nothing to do here. I'm not impressed by the mountains. I'm not impressed by the Olympic Peninsula. I don't like Seattle. I don't like this place. And really, what do you do? What can you do in America? The only thing to do in America is go to city council meetings. And I do go. Almost religiously. They happen every 2 weeks, and I try to say something. And when I go, I hear someone calling in from South Dakota. It's a former resident of Lakewood who lives in South Dakota now, but he likes to comment at city council meetings. And he is to the political right, I believe, and he often sings the praises of South Dakota's governor. He contrasts her and her great government with what's going on here in Washington State. And Kristi Noem has actually been in the news recently. And that's why I want to look at her horoscope before I look at today's stars, before I do the I Ching for today. So, to give you a glimpse about what's going on, let me show you a recent. This is Daily Beast article. So, according to this article, it says South Dakota governor proudly says 2-year-old granddaughter already has a rifle and shotgun. There she is, Kristi Noem. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem has proudly told audience members at the National Rifle Association convention that her 2-year-old granddaughter already owns firearms. Now, Addie, who you know soon will need them. I want to reassure you she already has a shotgun and she already has a rifle and she's got a little pony named Sparkles too, Noem said. So the girl is set up. While on stage, Noem also signed an executive order to further protect the Second Amendment rights of South Dakotans. So that gives you an idea of who we're dealing with, and we will now look at her chart. So, that's today's chart. So as far as Kristi Noem is concerned, there's Kristi Noem. So she's a Sagittarius. Now that kind of makes sense. Sagittarians like to, they like to be a little tactless. They like to be a little outrageous. And I'm sure she thought hard about the impact that saying her 2-year-old granddaughter would, having a rifle and a shotgun or whatever. She thought that was a good way to upset the liberals. That's a typical Sagittarian thing to do. She also has Jupiter in Sagittarius and Mercury in Sagittarius and Neptune in Sagittarius. So she's quite a big Sagittarian here. Now with Jupiter in Sagittarius, it's sometimes the case that we misunderstand Jupiter in Sagittarius. Jupiter is ruler of Sagittarius. Works very well. It would seem that this woman had a vision. She has strong ideas, and she likes to talk about them. But we do have to realize that Jupiter is a planet that is really into its ideas, almost in a judgmental kind of way. And Jupiter also traditionally rules the Republican Party. So if you want to be a Republican politician, having Jupiter in Sagittarius is great, because you can get on your high horse, you can talk about all your all your philosophies that you believe in, I suppose, for example, gun rights, anti-abortion, and so forth, and of course law and order. And South Dakota is death penalty state. I think as governor, she did sign off on one person's execution in 2019. So that really fits. But there is still, as I've said, the traditional view of Sagittarius, but it's nice and tactless, upsetting people by saying your 2-year-old granddaughter has a shotgun and a rifle. It's a very Sagittarian thing to do. Now, there is some interesting stuff about her chart that might not seem immediately apparent, and it's connected with the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now, if you look at her chart, the Mars-Saturn midpoint is, there's her Mars, there's her Saturn. So her Mars-Saturn midpoint is going to be about 23 Aries. Now that 22, 23 Aries. Now that means that her Sun is going to be at 3/8 of a circle from the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now remember, Mars-Saturn is connected with death. And using the midpoint school, the midpoint approach, one really looks at the hard aspects: squares, conjunctions, oppositions, 45-degree aspects, and 135-degree aspects. So her Sun is 135 degrees from the Mars-Saturn, from the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And if we actually look at her chart and we throw in a hypothetical planet, we see she's got Sun, you can't see it here, opposition Kronos, and both of them are on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. But when I saw that, having Sun on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, I was thinking, that represents dead men. And I'm not just talking about the man she had executed. Execution, she didn't have the man was executed while she was governor. I mean, it's quite common for Republican governors or governors in death penalty states to have people executed while they're on their watch. But I'm thinking more of other kinds of men, like particularly husbands. So I thought, oh, well, has she got any dead husbands, perhaps? No. Then I thought, actually, she's got a dead father. Okay, her father has been dead for some time. Her father actually was killed on March the 10th, 1994. And so she was in her early 20s. And so with this woman, with her Sun on her Mars-Saturn midpoint, I think her whole life, her whole career has been influenced by her father's death, because he died in quite an unpleasant way. He died, I think, in a grain elevator. I think he got sucked, or a grain bin. I don't know, in South Dakota, farming country, I don't know quite how it works, but he got sucked in, and that's how he met his death. And it was a complete disaster, obviously, but it was a financial issue because of death duties, and death is, that's been a big part apparently of her governor. She wanted to remove death duties so that her family wouldn't have to deal with the trauma there. And there's the father's horoscope. The father, real super Virgo, 5 planets in Virgo, and 1994, so he died, looks as if he died just before his 50th birthday. So he has 5 planets in Virgo, Moon in Scorpio. He's Mr. Virgo. Doesn't strike me as being my kind of person. Seems a sort of solid, very set in his ways, doing the right thing. Interestingly, his Sun is conjunct the asteroid Ceres, which is to do with grain. So that's a great thing for a grain farmer to have. But as far as midpoints are concerned, I was thinking, when I looked at his chart, I was thinking, I thought I was going to find Neptune on his Mars-Saturn midpoint. And sure enough, Mars Neptune is 45 degrees from his Mars-Saturn midpoint. And so if you've got Neptune on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, that might tell you or give you some idea about how someone dies. And there is something very Neptunian, isn't there? Neptune, I know, is the sea and it's not grain, but getting sucked into a grain bin and drowning in grain. I mean, that is real Neptune. Neptune on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So, going back to Kristi Noem's chart. Kristi Noem's chart. At the time of the death, let me just have a look at let's contrast this with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the inner wheel as her chart, the outer wheel as her father's death. So there's her sun on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. Sorry, on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And at the exact time that her father died, Neptune was at 2247 Capricorn, which is in fact almost exactly 45 degrees from her sun. So she has sun on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, which you could interpret as death of the father. And then she's got Neptune hitting her Mars-Saturn midpoint, which is interesting because her father also has Neptune on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And this perhaps indicates the event that she went through. And when you look at her chart from the point of view of hypotheticals, I just wanted to show you Kronos actually on the chart itself. So if we look at her chart and we show you we throw in the 8 trans-Neptune. There's her sun. It's opposition Kronos. And so Kronos is about government. And I'm kind of thinking with this sun opposition Kronos on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, yeah, I think that this perhaps is what made her. I think she claimed that this is where she had to take responsibility for her family and all this kind of stuff and had to give up one set of plans. Was it going to university or something? I don't know. And take responsibility. And this is what her governorship is all about. It's all predicated on her father dying and how she dealt with it. And I think this is really clearly shown in her chart. There's other stuff I could go into, but I can't go on forever. Okay, so that's Kristi Noem, and so I'm now going to look at the chart for today, Sunday, April the 16th, 2023. Is it a great day? Probably not. The moon is conjunct Saturn, so that suggests a certain amount of emotional constraint. We're not going to get everything we want, particularly at the beginning of the day. As the day progresses, things will get easier. At the same time, Venus and Saturn are in opposition, are still in square, and so beginning of the day we might find that old problems start to rear their head. So that is something to think about. But on a positive note, the moon does make a favourable sextile to Mercury towards the end of the day. So I think as the day progresses, I think it will get better. So don't be put off if you find that there are early problems. Mars continue. I talked about Mars conjunct Hades yesterday. It's still there. So the warnings I gave about Mars conjunct Hades still apply. Avoid sleazy people, avoid criminality, avoid people with criminal pasts. If you're a criminal yourself, make a really special effort to behave. Now, as far as my forecasts for the 12 signs, Aries, 3 stars, Take a back seat. Apply your brain to financial schemes. Taurus, 2 stars. Events can refocus old misunderstandings. Gemini, 4 stars. Very quietly, you start to see the full picture. Cancer, 1 star. Some of your ideas, even your fundamental philosophies, are one sandwich short of a picnic. Leo, 2 stars. Bad thoughts don't always translate into bad actions. Virgo, 3 stars. You can learn from partners, even if they're tedious. Libra, 2 stars. If the details don't get sorted out, they'll spoil the party. Scorpio, 3 stars. Don't have expectations of other people. Then you might be pleasantly surprised. Sagittarius, 2 stars. Your home is not where the heart is. Not today, it isn't. Capricorn, 3 stars. You don't suffer fools gladly. Aquarius, 2 stars. Stupidity isn't hard to find. Pisces, 3 stars. Through the delay and frustration, you can make things happen. So that's my I Ching. I've just finished my 12 signs. Now I'm going to move to the I Ching. I haven't got a picture for you. I threw up the coins and I got I Ching hexagram number 27, which the Wilhelm version of the I Ching describes as the corners of the mouth. It's a day when we need to watch what we eat. And we need to watch what we say. It really does matter. So make sure that you eat the right things. Make sure that you say the right words. Because you get it wrong, you might be misjudged. And one thing about this hexagram 27, which the I Ching does advise, it's really good advice. And it says that you can judge people by what they eat. That's not just literally what they eat. You know, people who eat cheese are going to be different from people who eat oranges. It's what people seem to thrive on. You know, some people may thrive on, I don't know, watching Formula One racing, or they might thrive on taking drugs. What gets people? What is really important to people? So if you're trying to make a decision about whether or not to trust someone over the weekend, then consider what this person eats. Consider what nourishes this person. Because once you discover and realize what nourishes them, you'll be able to make a decision about whether or not they are trustworthy. Anyway, that's all I've got for today, and I will talk to you tomorrow.